Somewhere beneath the scorched dust of southern Iraq, just 15 kilometers from the Iranian border, lies a city that shouldn't exist. Not because it's impossible, but because for nearly 2,000 years, nobody could find it. Ancient Roman writers described it. Merchants from India knew its name. Inscriptions carved in stone as far away as Syria referenced its power. And yet, it vanished, completely, without explanation. A city the size of a modern metropolis. Gone. Until now. If history is your obsession, if lost civilizations make your mind race, you're exactly where you need to be. Hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who thinks they know ancient history. Because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you were taught. Picture southern Iraq. Summer. The temperature pushes past 49 degrees Celsius. Hot enough to warp metal, to blur vision, to make the air itself feel like a warning. The landscape is flat, ancient, and silent. Nothing grows easily here. The wind moves dust in slow, lazy spirals across a terrain that hasn't changed much in 2,000 years. This is Jebel Kayyaber, a name most of the world has never heard. In 2014, British archaeologists working near the ancient city of Ur were quietly redirected to this location by local Iraqi authorities. What they found when they arrived stopped them cold. Rising from the earth, defying the desert, were city walls, stretching for kilometers, still standing up to 8 meters tall in places. Walls that had been sitting there, hiding in plain sight since the fall of the Roman Empire. They weren't looking for a lost city, and they found one anyway. The man who would later lead the full investigation was Professor Stefan Hauser of the University of Konstanz, a specialist in the ancient Near East, someone who had spent decades piecing together the broken history of Hellenistic Mesopotamia. When Hauser arrived and began mapping what lay beneath the surface, even he wasn't prepared for the scale of what the ground was concealing. This wasn't a settlement. This wasn't a village or a fort or an outpost. This was a metropolis. Because the site sits only 15 kilometers from the Iranian border, in a region scarred by the Iran-Iraq War, mined in places still sensitive, excavation was impossible in the traditional sense. No digging, no trenches, no shovels through ancient soil. So Hauser and his team did something remarkable. They went invisible, using magnetometer-based geophysical surveys. Instruments so sensitive they can detect the faint magnetic signatures of buried walls, kills, and canals through meters of undisturbed earth. The team began mapping what no human eye had seen for nearly 2 millennia. Simultaneously, thousands of drone flights generated high-resolution terrain models, revealing the ghost of a city pressed just beneath the surface. And what emerged from those maps was breathtaking. A meticulously planned street grid. Fortification walls enclosing a vast urban interior. Massive residential blocks, so large they surpass anything found at Seleucia on the Tigris, the great Parthian capital. Temple complexes, workshop districts filled with evidence of kilns and furnaces. An internal harbor system, canals threading through the city like veins. And at the center, structures so large, so deliberately positioned, that researchers describe them as palace-like complexes. The entire urban footprint, approximately 2.5 square miles, 6.5 square kilometers of organized, intentional, sophisticated city, sitting silent and invisible in the Iraqi desert. Fieldwalkers covered more than 500 square kilometers of surrounding terrain on foot, recording thousands of pottery fragments and ancient bricks scattered across the landscape. Every shard was a data point. Every broken brick was a whisper from a world that had decided to disappear. Professor Hauser, not a man given to hyperbole, described the geophysical evidence as absolutely stunning. He noted with genuine surprise that the preservation of walls just beneath the surface was surprisingly good. For a city abandoned for nearly 1,800 years, that alone is extraordinary. Here is where the story bends. Alexandria on the Tigris, also known in later centuries as Charax, Spasinou, or Charax Maishon, was not unknown to the ancient world. Far from it. Roman writers documented it. Greek geographers referenced it. Merchants traveling from India to Rome knew it as a vital gateway. Inscriptions mentioning the city have been found carved into stone in Palmyra, Syria, hundreds of kilometers away. This was a famous city, an important city, a city that mattered. And then, nothing. It simply ceased to exist in the historical record. No dramatic battle, no recorded catastrophe, no conquest that erased it from memory. How does a city this large, this connected, this commercially vital, disappear so completely that for nearly 2,000 years, scholars couldn't even agree on where it stood? Researchers have debated the location of Charax Spasinou for decades. As recently as the 1960s, British scholar John Hanseman spotted what appear to be massive settlement patterns in old Royal Air Force aerial photographs. And yet even that discovery led nowhere for half a century, swallowed by war, political instability, and the impossibility of access. A city known to the entire ancient world. A city mentioned in text from Rome to India. And nobody, for 2 millennia, could find it. That silence is the mystery. So what happened to Alexandria on the Tigris? Researchers now have a working explanation, but raises as many questions as it answers. The leading theory centers on environmental catastrophe, slow, geological, and absolute. Southern Mesopotamia is not stable ground. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers have been shifting their courses for thousands of years, driven by sediment accumulation and the gradual tilting of the land. Geological core samples and landscape analysis indicate that by the 3rd century CE, the Tigris had shifted significantly westward. The harbor that once made Alexandria the gateway to the Persian Gulf, that perfect confluence of river and sea, no longer existed. The water retreated. The trade routes died with it. And a city built entirely around maritime commerce had no reason left to exist. By 300 CE, Alexandria on the Tigris was stranded, miles from the nearest navigable water, far from the receding Gulf shoreline. Its population drifted away. Its buildings slowly fell. The desert moved in. This theory is scientifically well supported and widely accepted among researchers. But it is not without gaps. A second layer of explanation involves political collapse. The Parthian Empire, under whose rule Alexandria on the Tigris had flourished as a regional capital and trade hub for over 5 centuries, began to weaken in the 2nd and 3rd century CE. The rise of the Sasanian Persian Empire brought new power structures, new trade priorities, and new cities. Basra, further south, eventually absorbed the maritime role Alexandria had once played. The economic logic that had sustained the city for generations simply transferred elsewhere. Neither theory fully explains the totality of the city's erasure from cultural memory. Cities decline. Cities are abandoned. But cities this significant rarely vanish this completely. The depth of the forgetting that remains unexplained. What makes this discovery matter beyond the archaeology is what it tells us about how the ancient world actually worked. For centuries, the dominant narrative of early globalization focused on the Silk Road, the overland routes connecting Rome to China through Central Asia. But Alexandria on the Tigris tells a different story. Professor Hauser describes the city as a critical node in a maritime and riverine trade network that was moving spices, exotic hardwoods, semi-precious stones, textiles, and possibly Chinese silk, from India into the heart of Mesopotamia and onward to the Mediterranean world. All of this was happening more than 2,000 years ago through a city we didn't know existed at this scale until now. The residential blocks alone, the largest yet found from this era, suggest a population and an urban sophistication that forces historians to recalibrate their understanding of Hellenistic and Parthian urbanism in the Near East. These weren't frontier settlers. These were citizens of a world-class city, living in a globally connected economy, participating in trade networks that span from the Indian subcontinent to the shores of the Mediterranean. Alexandria on the Tigris wasn't just a port. It was proof that the ancient world was far more interconnected, far more modern in its ambitions than most textbooks suggest. And it had been forgotten, buried not by conquerors, but by time, by rivers, by shifting sand, and by the strange selective blindness of history. There is something deeply unsettling about this discovery, not in a supernatural sense, but in a deeply human one. Alexander the Great stood at this site in 324 BC. He looked at the confluence of the Tigris and the Karun, felt the warm salt air drifting up from the Persian Gulf just 1.8 kilometers away, and decided, here, this is where the city goes. A man who had already reshaped the known world, pausing to build one more monument to ambition at the edge of empire. And for 550 years after his death, that city lived. It breathed. It traded. It grew. Merchants unloaded Indian spices on its docks. Craftsmen fired kilns in its industrial quarters. Priests maintained temples to gods whose names we're only now beginning to recover. Palace administrators managed an economy that connected 3 continents. And then the river moved, just a few kilometers, just enough, and a city known across the ancient world slowly, quietly ceased to be remembered. No fire, no invasion, no final day, just water retreating, trade routes bending, and a city slowly exhaling its last breath into the desert air. What's haunting is not how it disappeared. What's haunting is how long it stayed hidden. Even as ancient writers kept mentioning it, even as its walls stood 8 meters tall in the Iraqi desert, even as its streets and temples lay pressed perfectly into the earth, waiting for someone with a magnetometer and a drone and the patience to listen. Here is the question I want to leave you with. If a city this large, this documented, this globally connected, could be lost for nearly 2,000 years, what else is still out there? What other metropolises, what other civilizations are sitting just beneath the surface of deserts and jungles and ocean floors? Not mythological, not speculative, but real, documented in ancient texts and simply waiting to be found. Leave your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you think disappeared and what you believe is still out there. If this video opens something in your mind, share it. The algorithm buries content like this. Your share is the only way it reaches the people who need to see it. Like the video, subscribe for more discoveries that rewrite history, and I'll see you in the next one. Because trust me, the next one is even stranger than this.